and very well with the podcast, Julie Brill. How are you today, Julie?
I'm great. Thank you, David. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. So let's get this started. This seems to be the most favorite part of the podcast for listeners is where are you right now on planet Earth?
Okay. I am north of west of Boston, so Massachusetts, New
Cool. And
England.
expand on
Yeah,
that because I was a little bit in Massachusetts before. So I was in is it Cambridge, Brighton,
sure. Yeah.
near Harvard.
Yep.
Not that I went to Harvard. I wish I did, but I never did. So
Went
where
by Harvard.
so in terms of location wise, what are we talking about? To give
Yeah,
some a point of if anybody wants to go to Massachusetts on holiday, what would you say?
sure. Yeah, Cambridge is lovely. I'm about 30 minutes by car north and west of that.
Okay, cool.
So more trees and less people.
Wonderful. And you get yourself any time down to is it Cape Cod and then over to
Yes. Yes, you do know your stuff.
I do, and then we have
Yeah.
Nantucket as well.
Yes, I have never been to Nantucket, but I've been to the Cape many, many times.
It's lovely, isn't it?
It's
It's very
lovely.
nice, especially in the
Yeah.
summer day.
Yeah.
And I think it's Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah. Very good. Were
There
you
we
there?
go. I didn't go to Martha's Vineyard. I I wouldn't say sailed past it. I wasn't sailing. I was in this boat that brought me from I think from the Cape all the way
A
over to
ferry,
Nantucket.
maybe.
Yeah, ferry I
Yeah.
think it was, yeah. And
Yeah.
kind of went past these wonderful homes and houses that had these
Hmm.
wonderful
Hmm.
American flags. I think Tommy Hilfiger was living there at the time or something like that. I don't know. This is
Everyone had it on his shirt and his,
that's it.
yeah.
It was a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite thing about where you live or Massachusetts? So if you were selling this now as a holiday review, or if somebody wanted to move to Massachusetts now, what's the what's the
Yeah.
thing that makes you so excited about living there?
I mean, I feel like we have everything. Like you were talking about Cambridge, we have like bookstores and universities and all the food that you would get in a major city. And, it's an international place. And we have the ocean that you mentioned, and we have mountains, and we have all of the seasons, like maybe not so much spring. It's spring today. We don't get a lot of spring, but winter for sure, summer, a gorgeous fall with the foliage.
And
Yeah.
and, and can you say, Julie, can you say park the car and have it yard?
I can say it either way.
You
Park
can
the
say
car
the
in Harvard Yard like a normal person, or park the car and have it yard.
cool.
Yeah,
Okay, we're
I got
getting that's very
it. Matt
important.
Damon would be proud.
We very Ben Affleck. I might be on the phone now in a few
Yes,
minutes.
yes.
And temperature wise now at the moment, I know it can get quite chilly. I was there in winter before, and it was really really cold. Where did we go? Where was the place where you get the shopping deals? They have the shopping outlets. I think there's a couple of
Oh, we have a couple of places like
yeah.
that.
It was
I
really
wonder where you
cold. It
went.
was. It was
Yeah,
so cold. But I
yeah.
know the summers are lovely. So what's it like at the moment?
It's beautiful. I said we don't have spring, but today is maybe the day of spring. It's like 75, sunny, a little breeze, no bugs yet, no humidity yet. It is really nice out today. We had 80s over the weekend, too hot, and we had snow the weekend before, so
It's
anything can
mad,
happen in
isn't it?
April.
It's a bit of a mix, isn't it?
It's all
Yeah.
the things. Yeah.
In Ireland at the moment, it's a bit of a heat wave. I mean, it's about 20 something degrees, and we're all burning. Our faces are going very red at the moment. But
Oh,
anyway,
Celsius, 20 is hot.
oh yeah, it's hot. For us, it's very hot. It is. My word, an Irish person out in the heat. Oh, forget about it. We turn
Yeah.
crispy very quickly. So I let the listeners know a little bit more kind of about yourself. So go back to the beginning. Start from the beginning. We're going to talk about obviously your career and so on, and obviously your book, which is just nicely placed behind your shoulder there. But
Yes.
so just talk a little bit more about yourself.
In terms of, give
Everything.
me something.
So generally start from the beginning. So start from where you grew up, where you were born, and then we'll move on after that into the
Okay.
college and the career.
Okay. So I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My parents sort of just happened to be there for a job at the time. But I really am from New England. Have lived here most of my life. My mother is from here. My grandmother was born here. I think I will always be here. So that's my place. And grew up in the hometown that I live in now. Raised my kids here. I have two grown daughters who are in their 20s and a very large golden retriever. And
And what's a golden
yeah,
retriever's name?
thank you for asking. Her name is Saltwater Taffy. The last one was named Honey, so it's kind of a theme.
Okay, and how old is saltwater taffy?
Yeah, you got the whole thing. She is 4. Goldens, I think, are puppies till they're 5, so we're
Right.
close to the end of puppyhood, but we are not there yet.
Okay. And is she chewing everything?
No, she doesn't chew. She just has a lot of energy and um,
Right.
she's big,
Okay.
so there's a lot of taffy.
Big dog lover. Are you a big dog lover?
I am, yeah.
Wonderful. And so tell me, in relation to, okay, you're Philadelphia, as Will Smith said, born and raised, maybe Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and then obviously you moved over to New England. What what then happened in terms of school life and then college life, and then where did that lead after that?
Yeah, so I went to college at Tufts University, which is in Somerville, Medford, Massachusetts, not that far away. Majored in sociology and gender studies. Did not know exactly what I wanted to do, but the work that I do is pretty much exactly what I wanted to do, even if I didn't know it at the time. So I've spent my whole career working with parents in the childbearing year. So teaching childbirth classes, working as a doula, doing some education prenatally and then labor and birth, postpartum. And now what I do is I'm a lactation consultant. So I mostly in people's homes, but also sometimes virtually help people feed their babies and kind of get off to a good start.
Okay, so you're not getting away with that easy. So what is a lactation consultant, especially
Yeah.
for a
So, I mean,
big
we help
man like
people feed.
myself?
Yeah, we help people feed their babies. So we know a lot about breastfeeding and lactation and how that works, but also bottles and cups and syringes and tubes and spoons. It turns out there's a lot of ways to feed a baby.
Right.
And we're always just trying to figure out a way that will work for the baby, but will work for the family too. So we're the only part of healthcare that treats a dyad, the parent and the baby. So it's thinking about what's good for both people.
Right. And what's a doula? You
Yeah,
don't.
a doula is somebody who helps people who are either in labor or postpartum. Some people do both. Some people specialize in one or the other. So not a midwife because it's not medical. It's the social, emotional, informational part of it.
Right. And where or when did all this kind of interest in like sociology and when did all this begin? Were you as a young child, is this kind of was this where you were heading towards, or was there somebody in the family that kind of was in that camp
Yeah.
already?
I didn't know it was where I was heading towards, except in retrospect, but my mother was always very positive about pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding. And I just happened when I was in college to take a class on the Amish. This is before the internet. And I read a book for the class by Penny Armstrong, who was a midwife with the Amish in Pennsylvania. And I was like, oh, there are still midwives. Like, who even knew? And there was a grad student in the class who was studying to be a midwife, random, and connected me. So that final year in college, I also took the class to prepare to be a midwife outside of Tufts. And that really launched me. It really feels like both like it was meant to be and a lot of luck went into
Right.
it.
And in terms of
Yeah.
Tufts, because Tufts University is a well-respected uh, college or university. Do we call them college or university in the States, or is it pretty much the same thing, just a different word?
Uh, they're one or the other usually. If they have a grad school component, they're a university. Otherwise, they're a college.
Right. And how tough was it to get in? I'm not kind of belittling, but in generally, if anybody wants to follow the path that you've gone down,
Yeah,
what do they
I
need
think
to
it's a
do?
lot harder now.
Right.
When my
Okay.
kids were looking at schools, everywhere we went, they would ask, the parents in the room, who's an alum? And then they would say, yeah, you probably can't get in now. Like it's just everything has gotten more and more competitive. I think now it's quite competitive.
Right. And in terms of like the SATs and so on, like in high school, what would you have having to kind of score? I mean, we talking big
Oh
numbers here,
man.
or is it a case of wing it until we succeed?
Nobody knows what the formula is for how they decide who gets in. I mean, I guess SATs, but I don't know. They went without them for a couple of years in the pandemic. Now they're requiring them a lot of places again. It's all very confusing. In Europe, you just go because you have the test scores, right? I mean, you either have the number or you don't.
Yeah, so pretty much we have here in Ireland, for example, similar thing in the UK. I think the UK have like GCSEs or A levels, and in Ireland we have a thing called the Leaving Cert. So for the Leaving Cert, you do about 7 exams, and then out of the 7 exams, I think each exam is worth 100 points or whatever it is, like say maths, English, or whatever. And
Right.
then it's generally it's like It's like the survival of the fittest. It's like,
Right.
if you get 700 marks, you're probably going to be a vet or a doctor or
And
whatever.
you know where you can go to school and what your future is.
Yes.
Here, it's like your grades matter, but also what the school was and what your SAT scores are, but also did you play a sport or an instrument where you were in the school play? Can you write an essay? Like it's very subjective.
Right. And would
Um,
sports be like a big thing as well in terms of trying to get, like, if you're on the application form for Tufts, you have to say, like, I was a team member and
I mean, I wasn't, but they care about that, and sometimes they're looking for a very specific thing. They
right.
need a bass player in the orchestra. They need, a second string tennis player on the women's team, doubles. They're sometimes looking for a really specific thing that you have no way of knowing.
Oh, okay. And what about your kiddies? I mean, what did they think of mummy being the lactation and birth educator? What's the conversation around the dinner table like? Is
Yeah.
it
So they're in their 20s. They know more than the average bear, more than the average person who has not had a baby about how to
okay?
feed a baby. They were both living at home during the pandemic. They came home and I was doing all my telehealth. And so they would like quote back to me things that I say over and over again. They thought that was like pretty funny.
Okay.
I feel like they could coach, a new mom through some basic things probably,
Right. And are,
just
are
from
they
osmosis.
okay? But are they following down the kind of the path of mum, or are they following a different?
They are their own people. One works with kids and one works in theater tech designing sets for Broadway.
Oh wow, that's
So
that's very
nothing to do
different.
with, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's we have to get one of them on the podcast or two of them.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
very varied. That is,
I
yeah.
would watch that.
That's very interesting. Okay, so let's then move on to your book. So Hidden in Plain Sight, and I'm trying to keep it as how would you say, for anybody that's wasn't aware of any problems or issues in Serbia, say during say what's the 1940s, early 1940s are we
Yes,
talking about?
yes. Yeah.
Um, can you give your kind of insight and knowledge of that, just to educate the listeners of because they're probably wondering, Serbia, what are you talking about?
Right, right. Syria,
Yeah. Well,
Siberia, where are we?
yeah.
Yeah.
So fill them in and keep it as we kind of we go basic first and then we'll build up then as we go along and find out more about the book.
Yeah. So, I mean, my family is from Serbia. My dad was born in Belgrade, then it was Yugoslavia. I wrote the book because it's just what you're saying. Nobody knows this history. We learn, at least in the US, generally about the Holocaust in Germany. We learn about Poland, maybe Anne Frank in Holland, maybe something about Hungary. That's really it. And the story in Yugoslavia or Serbia, which is where my family were, during the war was very different. And so I had my father's stories. He was very young. So he was born in 1938. The war starts in 1941. But he had these like flashbulb memories that he would share with us about what happened. And they didn't fit into the story that I thought was the story about the
Right.
Holocaust.
Okay.
And that's really what motivated me. The Holocaust in Eastern Europe happens early, it happens fast, it happens very locally. There are no cattle cars. There are no gas chambers yet in 1941. Hitler has not come up with the final solution yet. So it's really not the story that most people know.
And what was your dad's name? What was your parents' names? Just to give the listeners a kind of to have an emotional side to it as well. So what
Yeah.
was your mum and dad's name?
Yeah, so my mom is Martha. My dad is Chaim, but he got that name when he went to Israel in 1948. In Serbia, he was Heinrich. He
Right.
was named for his grandfather.
So over the years, Dan, I mean, were you getting really puzzled about all this because you were saying that your dad was kind of, he would say little snapshots of things. I mean, were you kind of, look, Dad, what are you talking about here? Like, we know
Yeah.
there was nothing going on in Serbia. What are you talking about? Like, you're
I
talking
mean,
Syria.
I didn't think he was making it up. I knew things had happened, but I could not plug it into a bigger picture. And in many ways, he couldn't either because he was so little. And he would just tell us these stories. So he would say, my great grandfather was the doctor to the king. Yugoslavia was a kingdom before World War II. And I would think a king, we don't have kings in the US. A king is
Right.
like something from a fairy tale,
Yes.
like along with a fairy godmother or something else. So it always kind of seemed magical. He would talk about his dad. Once the Germans got there, his dad did slave labor. He had to report every day, but he came home at night. He slept with his family, his wife, my grandmother and my father. And so that was not like any story that I had ever heard either. And so I would always try to ask him more. And he was so little, there wasn't really more. And that's why I started doing the research.
You're saying your dad was 3 years of age pretty much, so he probably wouldn't have remembering or kind of grasping the situation, so to speak.
Right.
Um, how then did your grandparents, I mean, how did they manage that situation, especially with your dad being so young? And
Yeah.
did he have any siblings as well?
So he has a younger sister who's actually born during the war after her father disappears.
Right.
So when the war starts in April 41, it's my dad living with his parents, and he also lived with two of his father's brothers, two of his uncles. And he doesn't really have any memories of that, the peacetime before. His first memory is of the German bombing. So that's the beginning of World War II in Yugoslavia. It's the beginning of the Holocaust in Yugoslavia. And it was, I think, really dramatic. So there was no expectation on the part of the civilians that there was a bombing coming. They initially, some of them thought it was an air show. And my father remembers the whistling sound of the bombs, and he remembers running in the street with his mother to a bomb shelter in their neighborhood. And the Germans were bombing civilian targets. They didn't have any military targets. So they bombed whatever people cared about. They bombed the zoo, they bombed the National Library. They also targeted the Jewish quarter, which is where my family was. They knew where the bomb shelters were. There was a turncoat who had given them this information. And so they bombed that. And they actually bombed the bomb shelter where my father was. Back when the bombing is finally over, my grandmother had put a plate of cookies on the wardrobe before they left. And when they came back, of course, it had fallen onto the floor and the plate had split in two. And when my father was telling me these stories, he, of course, was an adult. I was a small child, but it was really like a small child's memory being told to a small child. So it made sense to me on that kind of emotional level of like this interest in the plate of cookies.
Right.
And he said he remembered he dropped a cup once and the cup had shattered, but somehow this plate just in two. And so when I heard that story as a little kid, I was also focused on the plate. But then if you think about it, I mean, he saw horrible destruction coming back, right? The city was just destroyed, especially his Jewish neighborhood. There was no more working sewer system. Buildings were destroyed. People were in the rubble. I mean, it must have been horrifying. And the thing that his 3-year-old self could think about, not quite three, was this plate of cookies. And it's really like that split in his life and in the life of everyone in Yugoslavia from before, to afterwards.
Right.
It just seems so profound to have that as your first memory. And then in my research, like that bombing is a historical event. It was April 6th, 1941. So I could put it to a day and time. It fit into that. And really everything my dad said fit in once I learned the larger story.
And how did this make you feel once you kind of realized that, this was actually factual and that your dad, the little snippets that he had were actually truthful? How did
Uh,
it,
yeah.
did you have the doubt at the beginning and then you kind of went, well, actually, Dad, you're telling, you're telling it as it is.
I mean, it was profound to me that everything he said was exactly true. I'm sure there's things I remember from early childhood. I mean, I'll talk to my parents about stuff, or my brother and I will share a memory and we argue about what actually happened. I mean, I think that's normal.
Yeah.
But like that he actually remembered things, even things that sounded made up, were true. The first time we went to Belgrade, we went to this place in the center of the city. It's called Kalamagdan, and it's an ancient fort, and now it's a park, but it has a moat around it. And my dad said before we got there, I used to watch people play tennis there. There were red clay courts in the moat,
Right.
right? My great
Okay.
grandfather was a doctor for the king. There were red clay tennis courts in the moat. Doesn't it sound like, and we
Yeah.
got there and we walked around the back and kids are playing tennis on these red clay courts. Like
Yeah.
it didn't matter if it didn't make sense. It was true.
It sounds like Daddy was smoking something at the time.
Right. Yeah. And also, right, like, yeah, sure, next to the basketball court, in the whatever, in the
Yeah.
grand hall. I mean, it
Yeah.
didn't make any sense, but it was true.
Sure, Dad. Yeah, yeah. So in
Yeah.
terms of the in when you visited Belgrade, I mean, did you find any resistance in obtaining your research? I mean, is there a level of people just want to forget? Or did you find a
I
great
didn't,
openness?
yeah, I didn't encounter that among people that I met. Everybody we saw, first of all, was very welcoming. We came through the Nikola Tesla Airport in Belgrade, and
Wow.
my dad's place of birth on his passport is Belgrade.
Wow.
And I don't know what you call them, the clerk who checks you in when you're coming into a country.
Yeah, I think we
He,
call him Claire. That's it.
yeah,
We'll go
clerk.
with that. Yeah.
He was like, welcome home. I mean, that's the feeling. Like there,
Right.
lots of people have left Serbia for lots of reasons. Nikola Tesla left Serbia. We think of him as an American.
Yeah.
They named the airport after him. So it felt very welcoming. And the war, if not for most people in living memory, their grandparents told them about it. The parents
Right.
told them about it. So it happened there. Everybody, at the time experienced the war. It was a very terrible occupation. I think in some places the Germans and the local people kind of got along better and it wasn't so brutal. In Belgrade, it was very brutal. So everybody remembers that and talks about it. I think that the resistance to what happened is more on the part of the government than on the people.
Right. Do you think maybe it would have been highlighted more today? Obviously, with the back then, you didn't have social media. You were just being
Right,
told what you were being told, and that was it. Really.
right, right.
If they did want to tell you something, they wouldn't tell you something.
Yeah.
And that's probably quite frustrating because it's, it's so important to you. It's part of your life. It's part of your family life of where they came from. I mean, even with like your grandparents. I mean, what happened to them? I mean, what happened to them?
In the war, my father's parents.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. So I told you a little bit about it with my grandfather, but basically the bombing is early April. Within about 10 days, the Germans are boots on the ground in Belgrade, and they are registering the Jewish men and boys, ages 16 to 60. And my grandfather gets caught in that net with his younger brother. We have the list in Serbian of him being registered at Kalamagdan, that park I mentioned. And we have a photograph, which he must be in. I can't find his face, but someone told me recently with facial recognition now, we can find him in that crowd
right.
because it's just all blurry. But he was forced under threat of death to register and given a job. He was digging ditches and repairing sewage pipes for the Reich, slave labor. He was on a crew with his neighbors because I have a street pass, so there was a curfew for Jews. He wasn't able to just go out, except because he had to report for work. This street pass gave him permission, and he did that for several months. Around my father's third birthday in August, my grandfather doesn't return home. And my father remembers that as well. He remembers my grandmother screaming and crying. She had no way, of course, to know what had happened. And she probably thought the worst, that he was dead. She's pregnant with my aunt at that point, and it's just terrible. And what happened actually was at that point, the Jewish men were no longer allowed to come home. They were held in a camp in the center of the city, along with some Roma men. And the camp is terrible. So it's sort of a warning to the Serbs, like against rebellion, and there's nothing there. So there's a letter from the leader of the Jewish community. He's begging the Germans for straw so the men won't have to sleep on the ground. And there's not really food. There's not really anything that they need to survive. And so the Jewish women, including my grandmother, bring food. And so that's another one of these family stories that she would go to this concentration camp in the center of the city, which doesn't sound like any camp we ever learned about in school. They were somewhere far away and you didn't couldn't have visitors.
Yes.
And she did that for about 3 months. And then one day she came to the camp and the gates were open and no one was there. And so again, I mean, I think she thought the worst, but also she wanted to believe the rumors. And the rumors were that the men had been moved elsewhere to work for the Reich. And that makes sense. My grandfather's in his early 30s. He had been healthy. So my grandmother very much believed that. I think her whole life, on some level, she thought he might come back. But we know the story through research, which is that he was probably shot and killed that day, in November, that she, saw him as just disappeared.
So do you think that they lied in terms of the explanation of where your grandfather actually or what had happened to him? Because although he had disappeared, um, why put anybody through that, without actually giving an explanation to your grandmother at the time?
Yeah, so I don't know if there was like an official explanation or it was just rumors. People had heard something, people believed what made sense. The Germans had a policy every time a partisan shot and killed a German soldier, they killed 100 civilians. And every time
Wow.
one was wounded, they shot and killed 50. So they were using this pool of prisoners as well as just taking people off the street. They were getting people in other ways as well to make these quotas.
So you mentioned there, they had to register the men between 16 and 60 year olds. I mean, do you know how many were registered at the time? Do you know the numbers?
I mean, my guess is it's something like 5,000 given the population, Jewish population in Belgrade. It was not a giant Jewish population, but it was a long-standing established Jewish population. And it wasn't insignificant either.
There, yeah, okay. So, Julie, what about your grandmother? I mean, in terms of not knowing exactly, the story of your grandfather, um, how I mean, does she have an emptiness in her life? Was that ever spoken about? Was there any information you received in from your dad to say that, mum was or his mum was distant at times, or she just felt confused, why me, this type of stuff? Because it's very hard for me, maybe you as well, living in this world at this present moment of time, to kind of comprehend any of this type of stuff.
Right, right. I think that's maybe healthy that our brains can't
Yeah.
comprehend it. Yeah, so my grandmother never gave up hope that her husband was coming home. She never dated, she never remarried, and I never knew her. So she died in her sleep when she was 50.
Wow.
I have a
Young
heart
woman.
condition. What's
Yeah.
that?
A young woman.
Young. Yeah, yeah, seems younger all the time, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I really feel like she died of a broken heart. That, you know, I mean, for what happened to her family and to her husband, um, when you stand in the camp, which is not a museum in Belgrade, in the city center, and you see people walking back and forth, and they probably don't know what happened there, and it's not well marked, and it's not well cared for, and there's a overgrown yard and stray dogs and two crumbling buildings. You can imagine what it was like. I mean, of course, for the men who were in prison there who hadn't done anything wrong, but also for the women who were going to visit them. Like people around them were just living their lives, right? They were going to work, they were going home, they were going to a football match, they were doing whatever people do. Kids were going to school. And so she was really angry at Europe. And so as soon as she could, she left. When Israel became a state in 1948 and they had someplace they could go, they were there. So Israel becomes a state in May, and by December, my family is in Israel. So she really turned her back on Europe. She didn't want to have anything to do with it after everything that had happened.
And what about your dad? I mean, what after this happening? I mean, what was his upbringing like? I mean, it must have been very hard for your grandmother, firstly, but your dad is young. This is happening. He probably has no idea what's going on, why this is happening. Did he ever kind of discuss this in terms of how he felt or how, was his upbringing as normal as possible, or did he know any different?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're a kid, you don't know any different, right? It's only later you really can figure it out. I mean, his life was really hard. I mean, he had, I think, a few good years before the war, almost three. In early childhood, we talk about the first 1,000 days and how you really want that to go well for kids. That's when they're learning, is the world a safe place or not? They're really being formed before they have the language to go back to those memories and really reinterpret them. And my father's first 1,000 days, I think, were pretty good. Like they got that in.
Right.
So he is a solid person, functional person, but his life was tough. It was the war. It was, you know, age 6 to 10 after the war was not a nice time to be in Belgrade. There were retribution killings. There was a lot of discussion about who was, on the right side of the government and not. People were hanging literally from, signposts, terrible stuff, not enough food, just a lot of chaos as communism comes in. And then they went to Israel, and Israel was at war, and there wasn't enough food. I mean, he raises rabbits at one point, like just to try to have meat.
Right.
So it's tough. I mean, he had a tough childhood for sure.
But why do you think, even what's going on now in the world, why do you think humans? I mean, what's your thoughts behind all this? Just as a little sidetrack from
Yeah.
your book and your family story. But why do you still think this is going on? Because for me, we're kind of the way I picture the world. I don't know how you see it, but I see we're this little dot, right? We're in the middle of nothing. We're in the middle of space, and it's just us.
Yeah.
And no matter if color your skin, race, anything, whatever you want to call it, it's just us. That we're aware of. But we're always, nothing has really changed. It's amazing. My dad loves these Chinese movies or Asian movies or Japanese movies, and they go back, years and years and years, and they're fighting as well. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then there's another country then fighting 100 years later, another country's fighting 100 years later, and nothing changes. Why do
Right.
you think that is? If you were to give a
Yeah.
some sort of statement to the listeners or anybody out there, why do you think this is what's wrong with us?
I
I
mean,
mean, honestly.
I don't have the answer. It's anything I say, I'm going to sound so naive, I think. It's incredible to me that this is still how decisions get made, right? I mean, we have
Yeah.
active war zones right now. Like, how is that is our, like, we teach kids, like, use your words, like, how is it that the adults are doing this? It's
Yes.
hard to believe.
It's frightening.
Yeah.
The other thing I asked a guest a few weeks ago who spoke to me before recording. He was chatting about the Holocaust, his experience as well with his family, and I wonder, do you think? And this probably sounds a silly question, but do you think that the individuals who carried out these terrible things on your grandfather and his friends and family members, do you think they had any type of remorse years later?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know is the easy answer, right? Um, And I think it depends, but it's such an important question, even if we don't know the answer, right? Because it seems like for a lot of people, they were pretty normal before the war. They did these atrocities during the war, and after the war, they like went back to their regular lives. Like they weren't monsters, right? I mean,
Yes.
some of them came here to the US and lived, and no one had any idea, like that nice German man next door was a Nazi, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, how is that possible? I don't know. A friend of mine has a piece out today. It's the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Buchenwald, and her grandfather was a prisoner there. And he testified afterwards at Nuremberg about this terrible, they called him the bone crusher, this terrible Nazi in the camp. And at the end of the day, he would walk around with his wife and his baby and sing lullabies. So like that kind of stuff is so frightening, like that the human mind can switch on and off that
Yeah.
way. I don't know how it's possible, but we know that it is possible.
Yeah. It's scary even because I was looking at photographs of Hitler, pre Hitler, we'll say,
Yeah.
before the famous days, as we call them, the bad days. But he,
He was an art student, right?
yeah. But the
Yeah.
interesting thing was there was pictures of him with dogs.
Yeah.
And he actually rescued a dog, and there's a photograph of him with other friends or whatever you want to call them, army sergeants or whatever, and they rescued this dog. And I cannot comprehend that.
Right.
How you rescue one animal, or an animal of the planet, and you cause so much pain and suffering It,
I mean, we need to be really frightened of that, that you can be that, have that dichotomy, right? That you can be both of those people.
it is. It's shocking. But how do you feel about that? Because you mentioned there your wonderful. Hold on. Saltwater taffy dog.
Yes, yes.
Saltwater. So I'll be paying attention. But I mean, how would that make you? I'd be so. I think for myself personally, I'd be so angry to think that some individual could could be so compassionate to a dog or a cat, but yet, what your grandfather went through and your
Yeah.
grandmother. How do you comprehend that?
I mean, I don't know that I can, and I think that the sh being shocked is important. I think if we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, then we're really in trouble, you know? Like people often have a choice. I mean, in the Serbian story, there's collaboration and there's also resistance, and I think people didn't necessarily know which way they go beforehand. They get put in the same situation and they do, opposite things. They risk their lives for their neighbors. They, turn their neighbors in.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah.
it's frightening. Can I ask the cover of your book, Hidden in Plain Sight? There's two children on the cover.
Yes. Yes.
Who are show the book up there. So,
Yeah.
who are the children?
So the children are my father and the baby girl is my aunt. And we had this picture in my house when I was a kid. There were a few pictures from before the war, and there was this picture. And they weren't like in frames or anything. They were like in some envelope, and they would surface sometimes. And we would hold them carefully with our little fingers on the edges, if anybody remembers actual photographs.
Yes.
And I would just stare at this picture because I didn't understand how it was possible. That's really the mystery that drove me to the research that became Hidden in Plain Sight. So these children are Jewish children standing on the street. It's 1943. Belgrade is either the first or the second city, depending on who you ask, to be declared Judenfrei, which is German for free of Jews. That's the spring of 42. So a full year later, here are these Jewish children, and they're on the street. And I would ask my dad, how is this possible? How are you doing this? And he would say, well, my mother protected us. She was really strong. And
Right.
of course, lots of Jewish children with really strong parents were murdered, right? So it's the answer that kept him not only safe, but like feeling safe in the war, but it's not the story. And now I know that cameras were illegal in German occupied Europe because they didn't want people taking pictures of, a military secret or a military situation. So how this picture exists is a miracle for so many reasons. But somehow my grandmother got this picture taken and then it must have gotten developed and she
Right.
must have gotten back and got the, developed picture. And I think she did that so she would have it for my grandfather, that he was missing these early years and she
Right.
wanted him to have the picture.
Because it looks like a happy picture.
Yeah, I mean they look okay, right?
Yes, they look like
Yeah.
there's nothing really else going on, and it's kind of like it. The usual what today's in terms of a picture, you see so much of it today, like on all these social media platforms, and I think we spoke about this before we started recording, but pretend, and you look at that photograph, and then obviously as you open your book and you read your book, it probably doesn't match the stories of what's in the book to the
Yeah.
front cover of the picture. So
Yeah.
so tell us, can you tell me any story or one of your favorite parts of the book that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah. I mean, so the book is, of course, a story of my unraveling what happened to my family and doing historical research and passing that research up to my dad. So we think about like parents telling their children what happened in the family, and I'm doing the opposite. I'm passing it up. Information he should have known, but was stolen from him by the Nazis, and then it's his information. And he would say, my grandfather was a twin. We didn't know that before, but now it's just a thing we know, that kind of thing. Just regular family stuff. But the part that was really meaningful for me that I write about in the book is going to Belgrade. And we actually went to Belgrade 3 times. So my dad and I went on these 3 trips, and we took one or the other of my 2 adult children with us. And that was amazing. Like just to see my father in his hometown, to see the things he remembered. At one point, we're with a guide. We've kind of made this circle around the city, and the car breaks down at a traffic light, and my dad has had enough, and we get out of the car, we're going to walk to the hotel, and I have no idea where we are, and it seems far away, and he just beelines, and we're not looking at
Right.
GPS. The GPS is in his brain, and he just like he remembers. I'm like, Dad, how do you know where you are? And he said, we didn't have a lot of money. There was no TV. I would just walk for hours. And
Right.
so he remembered that 70 years later, the way
Wow.
the old city is laid out. We went to the cemetery. In Vermont, there's a saying that you're not really a Vermonter unless you have four grandparents in the ground.
Right.
And I
Okay.
will never be from anywhere, right? But my dad is from Belgrade. Like that idea, we went to the cemetery and this is where our family is buried and we are from here, was really, it really struck me, like to belong to some place, even though I had never been there before.
And your dad, I mean, emotions wise, how did he manage that situation?
I mean, it's a lot. Every day was like, 10 days long. I mean, all the ups and downs and emotions. The first time we went, he was on a new medication, so he had a lot of swelling. He was having trouble walking. He was very uncomfortable. But he was so excited to be back. Like the first, you come in and you're jet lagged, but the first morning that we wake up and now we're going to go and see the city, he was just so excited
Yeah.
to match, what it looks like now with what he remembers and all these new stories, all these new memories coming up as he's in the place where they happened.
It is. Did your dad, did he have, or does he have any memories of, or did he have any memories of any of his pals that he hung out with during that
Yeah.
time? And what's their stories? Did you hear anything from their side of it? Was it quite similar to what your dad was saying, or?
I didn't hear other stories, but he did talk about friends, and he had one friend who wound up in Canada and later in Texas, and they were in touch. This friend has passed, but they were in touch until the end. There's something about, I think, your childhood friends and also going through, those kinds of experiences that bonds you for life.
Did your dad ever have a sense of why me?
No, I mean, not that he ever says. I mean, I don't, he does. There are so many stories. It's not the like suffering Olympics, but there's so many stories of life in the camps, and things that were worse. I mean, it's only even recently that he's thought of himself as a Holocaust survivor. He doesn't have that attitude. I would say the why
Right.
me attitude. Yeah.
Do you think, Julie, do you think anybody, even the listeners of this podcast, know what Holocaust actually means? The word specifically? Because
Yeah.
I don't even want to say it because I think obviously it's a Greek word, I believe, and it's I won't say it on the podcast. I let people research that. But when for me personally, I think the Holocaust word it should be just it should be said as it is,
Yeah.
especially the atrocities that went on.
Yeah.
It kind of gives a bit of romance to it in terms of the word Holocaust. But
Yeah.
when you translate the word, if anybody's listening to this, please translate the word and educate yourself and all this type of stuff because it's pretty horrific. And it's
Yeah.
humans doing this against other humans.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's absolutely frightening. Um, what do you think, Julie, the future will be now going forward for Julie Brill? And do you think there will be more chapters, a second edition to this book? Are you still kind of doing a bit of research that maybe you felt, God, I need to dig a bit deeper for that one. I need to research that, investigate that. I mean, is that still a burning
I mean,
ambition?
I'm still living the story, it's not over yet. I plan to write articles. I'm still getting new information. I get connected to people by writing. People then share their stories, and then I know more. But there's not going to be a second memoir. This is it. It took me almost 10 years to write
Yeah,
this.
no, you're doing well.
Yeah, yeah. There will not be a part two, but there is more to the story. So one of the things that I was able to do when I first went in 2017, there were no markers with the names of Jews who were murdered anywhere in Serbia.
Right.
And we went to the neighborhood where my father lived, and we stood outside where his house was. And it's a busy neighborhood in the middle of the city. People are living their lives, but there's no sign of what happened there. And I really wanted that to be. So I worked with a local NGO on the ground, and we were able to get these stones. They're called, apologies to German speakers, Stolpersteine, these stones that would fit in the palm of your hand. They go in the ground in front of the last voluntary residence of victims and survivors of the Holocaust. They say the name of the person, their birth date, their death date, and like one line of what happened, like, deported to Auschwitz or something like that. And we were able to get these first stones in 2022. That's why we made that third trip. But we only have stones for the victims. So they put in 10 stones in Belgrade in July 2022. Three were for my family. And now we're trying to get the rest of it, which is the survivor stones, so that symbolically the victims and survivors are united in front of their home.
Right. That's
So
great. That's
there
brilliant.
will be more to write about. I mean, hopefully
Yes.
that will happen. The story's not over, but the book is done.
Do you enjoy the writing?
Um, yes and no. I
What's the
do a
pros
lot
and
of
cons?
writing.
What do you like
Yes.
about and what do you not like about
I like the writing when I'm feeling smart. I like the writing when I do a lot of like pre-writing, like I'll be walking the dog, I'll be paddling my kayak, I'll be driving in the car, and I'll be thinking about what I wanted to say and how I want to put things together. So when I sit down at the computer to actually do it, often there's a flow and the words are coming, and that can be really satisfying.
Right.
And sometimes there's connections that I didn't see until it's all on the page. Editing is another matter when you're like moving commas around and, you know, considering if it's an M dash or an N dash or that kind of stuff is I don't enjoy that at all.
Do you hope the book progresses into maybe a other media format in terms of a movie or some sort of series to kind of highlight more of what went on in Serbia?
I mean, a movie would be amazing. That's really a way to reach people. I wrote the book because no one knows the story. There really was not a book on the Holocaust in Yugoslavia. At one point, I went to the bookstore in the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, which is a giant museum, and went to the bookstore and looked under why, and there were just no books, nothing for
Wow.
Yugoslavia. That's why I wrote the book. So, a movie would be, an even broader way to reach people. I also very much want the book to be translated. So I would love for it to be in Serbian, Serbo-Croatian. I would love for it to be in German. I would love for it to be in Hebrew, just as a way to reach more people.
Well, you've reached me anyway, because I think it's a case of probably like most that I wasn't aware, other than what, not say the usual, but over the years, what we've been informed, especially through
Yeah.
education and school, there wasn't much more in terms of information of Holocaust in Serbia specifically. So well done you. Where can the book be purchased? Where can you sell yourself now, Julie? All the hard work the
Yeah.
last 10 years. Would sell it.
You can get the book wherever you like to buy your book. So if you like to buy it online and all those places, if your bookstore doesn't have it, you can ask them to order it for you. So it really is available any way you want to get it.
Wonderful. And in terms of, do you do speaking events? I'm
Yes,
trying to sell
yes.
yourself here, Julie. Come on, you put the effort
Thank
in.
you. Thank
Let's
you.
get it
I
out
would love
there.
to virtual events, real events, book clubs. I, have a little book tour right now. The book just launched last week, but you can contact me through my website. It's juliebrill.com, and I would love to, coordinate to tell pe more people this story. You were saying, Dave, that people don't know the story. And you need survivors and then you need descendants to tell a story. That's why we know the story of Auschwitz. A
Yeah.
million Jews were murdered there. It's terrible. But tens of thousands of young survivors that told the story and told the story again. In Eastern Europe, that's not the case. There just was such a complete loss that people haven't heard these stories.
That's frightening. So, as I say, listeners out there, we will try, if we can, learn from our previous mistakes that humans do on other humans, which is just shocking, and it just doesn't seem to stop. It's just
Yeah.
constantly over and over, and I keep saying we're in this little dot from the middle of nothing, and we should be looking after each other. Now, well, that's
In
not
that
really mean.
perspective,
Yes,
right?
I mean generally, like you can see the behind, obviously the world behind me on the camera here,
Yeah.
like in a space station. But we're only a little dot, and I'm not here to be forthright or I make mistakes like anybody else. But we should try as best we can, get on with each other. And we're here for a short time, so let's try and enjoy it as best we can, no matter our differences, our beliefs. Just have a bit of fun and accept each other as best we can.
Yes, please.
So Julie, where do listeners get in touch with you? Are you on the
Yes.
LinkedIn's and the Facebooks and all that stuff?
I'm on all of the places, Instagram, Julia Brill. It's all compiled on my website. So if you go to juliebrill.com, you can find me in all the places.
Brilliant. So, a big thank you to Julie Brill for chatting today on the Wellbeing Curve podcast. Once the podcast has been approved, it'll be released. And I'll put all the links in that you can contact Julie direct and information on her book, Hidden in Plain Sight. Thanks so much, Julie, for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it.